Welcome to the MS Gym podcast. I'm your host, Jody Feltham, and it's about to get real as we listen to the victories and struggles of our own MS Gym members. So let's dive in. Hello, MS Gym family. I am so glad that you joined us today, and I'm really excited for today's guest. Kelly, I have known pretty much since the beginning of the MS Gym. Kelly O'Connell was actually our very first moderator. And I got to know Kelly well from some of the groups behind the scenes, not kind of in the front of the group, but it's been so great getting to know Kelly on a personal level. And I have such admiration for her because she seems to be able to do it all. And today I am so excited because Kelly's going to be talking about a topic that, applies to so many of those, obviously in life, but also in the MS Gym. So today we're going to be talking about what it's like to have MS and also to be involved in full-time employment. So Kelly, so glad you could join me today. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. So, Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about when you were diagnosed and kind of how that journey progressed along?
Sure. So I was diagnosed in 1999. I was in a car accident, and it wasn't a major car accident, but it kind of was enough to probably bring out the symptoms for MS. And at the time, I didn't know. So I was going to a chiropractor, and I just felt like numbness and tingling. And I thought, I wonder if that is from the impact. So my chiropractor sent me to get an MRI. And then he saw the results, and he was just like, I think I need to refer you to a neurologist because it looks like you have MS. So the chiropractor is the one that diagnosed me with MS. So
Wow.
yeah, I was shocked.
That would be shocking and certainly
Yeah,
not something you'd expect from a chiropractor visit. My goodness.
exactly. I know. Yeah. So he kind of he was really, I was thankful that I was diagnosed sort of like right away. So
Mhm.
yeah.
So how did things kind of progress? Like, where would you say you are now? So 1999. So that is like 20 years ago. How would you say things
hmm
have been in the last 20 years in regards to your MS?
Well, when I first was diagnosed, I had this neurologist, and probably I've been in the same group for, I don't know, from the beginning. And so, but I've had 3 different neurologists in that group because they just seemed to pass away. Right. So, um, and I remember my first neurologist saying to me, that you know, he just gave me a lot of literature and was like, you have to take naps during the day. And I was just, obviously, other things, about the heat intolerance and that sort of thing. But I was just like, nap. And at the time, my kids they were young. They were probably, uh, 5 and 5 and 8, I think, at the time. And I wasn't working, at the time, and I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was just like napping. That just never occurred to me. So I was like, I don't know about that. But so I just kept plugging along and, didn't really think anything of it. Um, I have to say that it has been, as slowly, MS has, for me, it's really just slowly progressed. And I want to say it's been in the last 5 to 7 years now that I have seen sort of a change. But I used to run, and, I've always watched what I ate, and that sort of thing. But it's probably been the last 5 or 6 years that I noticed like sort of like a limp. Um, and that really kind of like has slowed down. my cardio before, I used to, like I said, used to run. Now, the cardio is not so, it's not the same. I can do an elliptical, but, I don't have the coordination to run anymore.
Okay. So today's topic, we're talking a lot about work in MS. So would you tell us about the type of work you do, and maybe even when you started doing that work? Because you mentioned in the beginning that you were raising two young kids, and you were,
Hmm.
being a mom was your full time job. So
Right.
tell us a little bit about your kind of your work history
Hmm.
and things like that.
Sure. So I am a toddler teacher, and I work 40 hours a week, and I'm out of the house about 50, just because of the commute and that sort of thing. I've been a teacher probably, I mean, since I was 7, I knew that I wanted to be an early childhood educator. So, my oldest son now is 32. So I've been teaching for probably 33 years. And so, like I said, I am a toddler teacher, and I have been, I work with 8 toddlers in the classroom, and they range from 14 months to 2 years old. And they really keep me on my toes. I'm up and down on the floor, and you know, there's so many different. I think that being a toddler teacher is more physical, than, being, teaching children who are 4 and 5, where, that's more mental. But, it's so funny because I think that, when I'm at work, um, they, like I said, they keep me on my toes, and sometimes I have to forget what BGB is like when I have to get in between a toddler who is biting another friend, and I feel like I'm like the Matrix. I'm just going to dive right in and not think about BGB at that moment. So
Mhm. Would
yeah.
you tell us very briefly what BGB is for our listeners that
Oh sure, BG is butts, guts, and blades.
no. Okay, and that's that's part of the MS gym lingo, and
Hmm.
that's kind of like the heartbeat of all we do. We've got Trevor Wicken's voice always in our head telling us to activate our butts, guts, and blades. So so Kelly, it sounds it's true what you said about being a toddler teacher is way different than being a teacher of grade 4 and 5 or even high school or university. Like it's so physically demanding. Like just as you were talking about getting on and off the floor,
Hmm.
chasing toddlers, making getting in between biting fights and stuff like that.
Right.
Like for a 20 something person who is 100% able bodied, that would be an exhausting workout. And then added the complications and the issues with MS, like that itself seems like it would be so exhausting. So like I said in the beginning, I've admired you from the beginning because you put so much heart into the work you do behind the scenes and in the welcoming in the MS gym, but you give your heart out. Like it's not just a physical thing, but obviously
Hmm.
you invest in the life of these toddlers, and so there's an emotional component too. So how do you go, like you said, 40 hours a week and then an extra
Yeah.
10 hours in commuting? So how the heck do you balance that out with sleep and exercise and family time? And you've got a few grandkids too.
Hmm.
How do you do it all, like
Yeah.
Wonder Woman?
Well, I think that the balance inside of it is you kind of have to like put yourself first in that sense of like my husband is my biggest fan, and he's behind me every step of the way. And I am so thankful that we are empty nesters and I don't have small kids, because I don't know if it'd just be so hard to work and then come back and, then have to take care of small children. But, my husband, he does the dishwasher and the clothes. So I have to, I just take care of the cooking. But The routine usually is that when I get home, we'll have a coffee together and we'll talk about our day. And that, my commute is probably about 35 minutes from back home. So, I get that rest period there, and then we'll talk for another half an hour. And so by then, I'm ready to either start cooking or exercise. And I probably have for many years have been exercising right after we sort of catch up. But I do have to say that, there are days that I'm just tired, but I know that it is so important for our bodies. And we're our number one priority, and we have to it for me, it feels so much better after I exercise. No matter how tired we are, we just sort of have to dig deep, and we are worth healing. So, I think if you've got the great support system that you have behind you, and as far as like doing work for the MS gym, in the beginning, I was just like, okay, I can only have time to like to check my notifications, and I'll only do notifications. Forget about my personal Facebook wall. And after 3.5 years or whatever, however it's been, I still am only doing notifications. And I'll do that on my break at work. So, um, I sort of get that done that way.
Awesome. And I love how you highlighted that you're the first priority, because really it is. Because, Trevor's talked about so many times, right? If it's like in an airplane, you need to put the oxygen mask first on yourself before you give it to other people. And this,
Exactly.
right? Like mama needs to be good so the whole system works, right? And
Yeah.
so you mentioned you don't have young kids, but you have quite an involvement with your grandkids though. So that's
Right.
got to add some more, and obviously that's something you love to do, but that's, you only have 24 hours in a day. So somehow that's got to fit in, and emotionally too, you want to be there and be present.
Yes.
So that definitely
Yeah.
is something you have to schedule in as well.
Exactly. Yeah. Like just the other day, my grandson was over, and I was getting ready for dinner. I was cooking dinner, and he came up to me. He goes, "Nanny, can we make cookies?" And in my brain, I'm like, "Oh, I really wanted to work out. I really wanted to work out after this dinner." But I thought to myself, you know what? Sometimes you just have to like figure out, you have to, and you've, taught me this, Jody, about spoons. And, and I feel like also making memories. And even though he's 10, he may not remember like baking cookies, but I will. And I'm just like, you know what? That workout can wait. Or, you know what? It'll happen tomorrow and it's okay. You know what I mean? So we ended up baking cookies. And, so I'm glad I had that opportunity.
That's a great example. And you know what? The whole point of the MS gym is to help make us stronger so we can make those memories, right? It's not about exercising so we can exercise more. It's about living life, right? Living a life
Exactly.
not by diagnosis. And
Right.
and the and him, your grandson being 10, he's gonna remember that for sure. 10 years old is,
Mhm.
well, those will be formative memories for him, and certainly for you. So I'm glad
Yeah.
that you've given yourself grace to not be like a drill sergeant, like I have to do this, but you've given
Mhm.
yourself freedom to live and
Right.
and to love your family. So that's incredible.
Yeah.
So my next question is, how do you keep your threat bucket low? And in regards, for those in the MS gym, they'll kind of understand what that means. It's about, when we talk about threat buckets, it's all the little things that happen to us in a day, whether it's intentional or non-intentional, that kind of, we only have so much capacity to deal with stress in our life. And when things keep getting dumped in this bucket, it overflows. And, in regards to MS, that's when our symptoms start to flare up. So how, obviously with COVID too, and all these kids that you're teaching, like there's so many things that would have just completely, flooded your threat bucket. So how did you deal with that, and still dealing with it, and even before COVID, how did you keep your threat bucket low?
I think that for me, it's about prayer. It's about starting off with a devotional, remembering what my purpose is for that day.
Great. It's important to start our day off well grounded, and I'm glad that you found that resource for yourself to help you get focused. Because I'm sure it's got to be overwhelming some days. You think about the commute and you think about the toddlers in your group, and I'm sure that there are some that are probably more challenging than others and stuff like it. It would be easy to get overwhelmed, before you even get in the car, or before you even get dressed.
Exactly.
Oh, that's great. So what would you say keeps you motivated to press on, to keep pressing play, to plug into the MS Gym? What is it? We talk about, motivation, we talk about, what's your why? Like, why do you do these things? Why is it important to you to be active, to be mobile, to be able to engage in life?
hmm I think that what keeps me motivated just seems to be repetition and focus. It's almost just, I feel so good when my body feels good. Um, and it's just becoming, it's like almost like this drug of, that's habit forming. Especially again, like when you see and feel the results, even if they're just for that moment, if we stay focused on what sort of the prize is at that moment. My kids and my husband are my why. My oldest son, who's 32, I don't want to start crying. Whew. He he gave me this card once, and he said to me, "You're the strongest woman I know, and for a boy to even like suggest any kind of like feelings, kind of like just blew me away." And you never know, how you're going to be some sort of like role model to somebody. So I was totally surprised when I got that card, but it really is, you really do make an impression on, the people around you. So sorry for that.
No apologies necessary, Kelly. It's wonderful to hear your heart. And I always say in the MS gym, tears are welcome, because that's part of life. MS is hard, and tears can be hard moments, but they can also be happy moments. And that moment, just like you making the cookies
Mhm.
with your grandson, will stick in your head. Obviously, that moment reading that card, and I don't know how long ago you got that card, but I
It was
think,
just a couple of months ago.
oh, was it? That's
Yeah.
incredible. Especially you said as as your son, as a male, but as a grown adult, to recognize that in you. And obviously, it wasn't a static moment. Obviously, he's 32. He's been watching you all along,
Right.
since he was 5 or 8 or whatever, when you were just,
Yeah.
and you've been, that's been like your testimony to him. Maybe it hasn't been in words, but he's seen you, fighting the good fight. And,
Right.
that's incredible. And so it actually ties into my next question. So, the next question is, say, what do you want your grandsons to say about you when you're older?
I think that if you ask them, "Oh, where's Nanny today?" They would like totally say, "Oh, she's probably in the gym, working out." But I mean, they've worked out with me, they've worked out with Trevor, and I've introduced them to my buddy group. So, when we've done a workout, and I really hope that without an explanation or teaching them what MS is or talking about it, I would hope that my grandkids would grow up to be compassionate and empathetic. And if they saw somebody struggling with like a package in their hands and trying to get to the door, I would hope that they would have the ability to help others out in that way.
And I have no doubt they'd be like that, Kelly, because obviously it's a podcast, and this might be your first time hearing the name Kelly O'Connell, but I've got to know her over the last 3.5 years. And everyone, whether it's a Zoom meeting or a messenger call, everyone talks about you, Kelly, and about the light that you exude. And I genuinely mean that. You have left such an impression on so many people. And, I feel so blessed that I am one of those people because I have the utmost respect for you. And I have no doubt that the people in your family have that in a million times more because you're your blood and you're their nana or you're their mom or you're their wife. So what would you say to other MS gymmers that are trying to balance this out, whether it's family, work, exercise? There can be so many different dynamics,
Mhm.
that are hard for, the average person, let alone with the health challenges. So what kind of things would you tell them to do to form a schedule or a plan?
I want to say that no matter how hard it is or how you feel at the time, I feel that, you have to dig deep because, you are worth healing. It's important to tweak things so that, you do come first with exercise because you are the most number one person out there. If you can't take care of yourself, how can you take care of others? When I read the victories in the MS gym, I am so happy. I'm like doing this happy dance for you. And when I read the struggles, the struggles of sadness, I have tears for everybody in the MS gym.
What is it that kind of you struggle with the most, or what is the hardest thing for you on track?
I think that the biggest struggle for me is probably because, like I said, that I walk with a limp. I would say my appearance when I'm at work, if there are parents there, that sort of like don't know who I am, and they see, this person walking, I would say that that would be my biggest struggle. I've had in the past waited for parents to like leave the parking lot. Until then, I would make an appearance. But recently I've decided, you know what? I feel like this is who I am.
Mm.
And, my acceptance of about the way that I walk is, I can't change that fact. And, just, I think before we had a, um, we had a Zoom meeting with my new parents this year, and I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to come out and be transparent because that's really who I am. And I said to them, we had to introduce ourselves and say a little bit about this. And I said, you know what, you guys, to take the guesswork out of why I walk the way I walk, I said, and I told them, I said, I have MS. I said, and your children are keeping me out of a wheelchair. So I feel that acceptance for the way that my body is, you know, it doesn't change the fact of who I am just because, I have that sort of like, you know, wonky walk.
Oh, Kelly, that really is something beautiful to hear because I know that's part of the mental dialogue. Any of us with mobility challenges, whether it is, using a walker or wheelchair, or like you said, having a little bit of a hitch in your giddy up.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
still we're always thinking about, what other people are going to think of us. And
Yes.
I'm sure that you choosing to, disclose your information to those parents, I'm sure that actually emptied your threat bucket.
Yes, it definitely
I'm sure
did.
you had a lot of freedom in that because I can just imagine you like hanging out after hours to wait till all the parents left the parking lot. Like how much that would have filled up your threat bucket, and just the lies and the fear that would have gotten into your head at that point, thinking, oh, what are they going to say and stuff. But by
Yeah.
by being transparent, And even what you said, your kids are keeping me out of a wheelchair, like that is so beautiful and that is so empowering. It's hard, like life is hard for anyone, but with having a chronic illness, it adds an extra dimension to that. And so people look on with this. We think they're looking on in judgment, but they're looking on in admiration. So I'm glad
Yeah.
you've been able to have that, that transformation in your own, your own heart and your own mind about how people see you. Is there anything else that you'd, like to share, your final comment, your final send off?
I probably would piggyback on the whole struggle thing. If you are having a bad day and if you don't like the way that, you move that day, just think about this. Think about what you can do as opposed to what you can't do. If I'm in my car at the end of the day and I think about all the lies that could go on, and you know, I feel like we have to think about what we did that day. I made it through the day as opposed to thinking what I could have done better. And instead of that, think about what you did and what you can do. And so what? It doesn't look so graceful and like, we're not balancing like a ballerina. But you know what? We did it and you can too.
That's great, Kelly. That is a great end to our discussion. Thank you again, Kelly. So much great insight, and I know our listeners are going to love hearing from you. And I love having all these different topics. Just kind of about living life with MS and working or having kids. Like all these things are so important to us. So I'm so glad you agreed to talk with me today. And I wish you all the best, and I look forward to hearing more and more from you.
Thank you so much, Jody. It was good talking to you too.
Do you want to give a voice to your own story or learn more about the MS Gym? You can check us out at themsgym.com.